So everybody, just so you know, I've pressed record on the session because not everybody was able to make this session today. And there was a request that it was recorded so it could be watched later or referred to. If that's problematic, if you can get in touch with me, perhaps privately, happy to relay and maybe take some time out halfway through and address that. And of course, there's going to be a little bit of kind of breakouts and interaction. I'm going to ask you to feedback, but it's mostly going to be delivered. So, if you do want to turn your camera off, that's up to you, if that makes you feel more comfortable. Okay, so thanks for coming along today, everybody. Here we're going to talk about developing the strategy, launching the strategy development project. So, as hopefully you're all aware, we have a existing strategic plan that ran 2017 to 2020, developed with by all of you, an SLT under Michael's leadership, the previous CEO. And since my arrival here, what's nearly 2 years ago, we've been looking ahead at what for when the next strategy comes online. Now, we've had a few things that have got in the way over the last 18 months. First of all, the Vice Chancellor left at the end of the university's own strategic planning cycle. And we've had this kind of changeover of senior leadership at the university. But then obviously we had the pandemic. And so there's been regular kind of discussion with the trustees about when the right time is to bring a new strategic plan forward, but also quite sure that we want to keep moving forward. And that's why last summer we got together and we developed that new plan that was in part a response to the pandemic in supporting students in 2021. But it was also about maintaining that pace and energy towards a future plan that we could see on the horizon. So I'm going to talk to you today about the kind of project as it is to develop the new strategy over the next 2 to 3 months, with the idea that by the summer we will have a new strategic plan that we can be working to. When we come to be developing department plans over the summer, regular activity, the idea is that they will be informed by that strategy that we've developed. And so the aim of today is to really introduce you to the concept of a strategic plan, outline what the timeline is and what the activities are that are involved, and then kind of look to identify who's going to be involved in what process. A real balance that, it's up to me to make sure I get is that, I want people to feel involved and a part of developing the future direction. At the same time, we want to make sure that the strategy is simple and it's clear, but also it feeds down and affects everybody's work, and that it is in response to the big challenges we see as an organization and the big goals for where we want to be. Now, that will inevitably mean quite a lot of sifting through data, analysis, lots of looking at our current context. And so what I need to balance is how collaborative every step of the way is. And so one of the ways of doing that is to be presenting the approach to you today. And a big thing that I'm hoping to get from you, if you have feelings like this, is if something just doesn't feel right, or you're unsure about something, you'd like to be involved more, you'd like to be involved less, you think it's too bureaucratic, not bureaucratic enough. Actually, I want to hear about that. And it might be that you reflect on that over the next couple of weeks and you feedback to me later, that's fine too. But I'm very keen to get your feedback on the process as much as I am to see you involved in the formation of the new strategic plan. So over the next 90 minutes, we're going to look at what is strategy and how do we get one. We're going to look at timeline and project outline. So as I've just said, what are the first steps? How do we go about it? What meetings are going to take place? And then I hope to, near the end, get to talking about, beginning with our biggest challenges. If we've got time, I'd like to actually ask you while you're here about what the biggest challenges facing the SU are. So first of all, we're going to start with a bit of a task. It is the 19th of January 2026, and BEDS SU is 100% successful at doing what it does. And so I'd like to put you in some random groups. So we've got probably 4 groups, so there'll be 4 or 5 of you in each group. I'm going to instruct Zoom to just throw you into the groups. And I'd like you to spend the next 15 minutes talking together and working out what you think, working out how to describe BEDS SU on the 19th of January in 2026. Welcome back, everybody. Still waiting for everyone to come. Seem to have got a few people stuck. Oh, here we go. And we're back. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so it's the 19th of January 2026, and BEDS SU is 100% successful at what it does. Describe BEDS SU as vividly as possible. So do we have a spokesperson or multiple from room 1?
I made notes, so I guess it's me. I assume that's cool with the rest of the group. So 2026, 100% of students are engaged with the SU. All campuses are treated equitably, and we have a presence at all campuses. 100% of students across campuses feel represented by BEDS SU. 100% of students are engaged with our online presence. 100% of students know where to go in the event they need support, and those that have approached us feel their cases have been dealt with effectively. We have 300 active societies and active focus groups representing mature and international student groups. We have active liberation networks making a positive impact and bringing about change not just in the university, but within their wider communities. Reps are all representative of the entire student body. There is 100% engagement in all of the SU's democratic processes. Venues are making a healthy profit. Events are sold out and cover a wide range of interests. And our website meets accessibility guidelines and is modern, fast, and easy to use.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, well, thanks for coming, everybody, and I'll see you all later for tomorrow's session. Yeah, well done, room 1. Yeah. Very good, very good. Quick question. So 100% engaged, what does engaged mean?
In regards to which point? The democratic process?
So democratic process, I'm assuming engaged means they're taking part.
We're receiving 17,000 votes, yes.
Great, just great. And so that means the university still has 17,000 students in 2026.
Yes.
Super. The first time you mentioned engaged, I think you said 100% of students are all engaged or something like that. So what did you mean by that, or what did your room mean?
I think we meant that they are engaged. They have contacted the BEDS SU in some way. They visited the website, perhaps. They are engaged in a society. So engaged in one of our activities.
Okay, all right.
Yes, I think it was about active involvement, whether it's knowing who we are, contributing, attending events, but it's about being actively aware of us and either as part of society or in the electoral processes or contributing something.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks for clarifying that, David and Matt. Room 2.
Well, was I in room 2? Sorry, I think I might have been in room 2 with Mick and Jack and Margaretta. I'm sorry, I was just scribbling some of our notes down. Yeah, unfortunately, it's the first time today that myself and Mick have been in a room together. So you'll know from the responses there will be an element of dry wit and sarcasm in ours. So For 2026, we expected the students to their profits to be going through the roof in our merchandise and media sales. We would have a virtual reception. Maggie described it as kind of like a sci-fi virtual. We also sort of floated with the idea that we would have like a Beds SU robot that would kind of be able to filter through the kind of number of students that just need to be signposted to SID, so that we could kind of focus on other sort of areas that need a little bit more attention. Of course, we would have lots of financial freedom, so less reliant on UOB. We said something about that maybe the admissions policy may start reflecting how they recruit students and hopefully not be recruiting students to fail. And that the support that is offered to students would be offered to all students, regardless of what campus they're on, whether they're international, UK, EU students. We hoped that maybe there was, in this sort of more modern virtual world that we seem to be living in at the moment, that there'd be some sort of more adapted resources and progression for things like around virtual technology, so that we can start sort of running events again, but that are kind of targeted and modern and something that students want to engage with. 2026, what we would have learned is what we'd learned from the lockdown in 2021. So hopefully we would have some really positive things that actually we learned from the lockdown that we would be taking forward and doing in 2026. And the last one, I think, or a couple of last ones, we put about the democratic process being successfully well attended students, students engaged in voting, knowing that they're members. We put another couple of things. We had staff feeling appreciated and valued by being able to achieve the organisational strategy, and we put like a lookalike that he could send to meetings that is voice activated, so it would nod and things like that. So yeah, that's our feedback.
I mean, we might not have the resources for a lookalike, but we could. I mean, some of us could, you know, take the hair off and, you know, try and model ourselves in your image, Mick. We could give that a go.
Mick, you could just pre-record yourself, just you know, in a meeting and just play that at all meeting.
Yeah,
I saw it done. Someone did it already.
Margaretta, Jack, Mick, have I missed anything?
Okay, very good. So there's some interesting things there. A bit of a different approach from the previous room, and also in terms of kind of what success looks like. You know, a lot of it's kind of learning. You've mentioned learning and like developing and evolving with the current structures. Some reference to the university there. Success for us also includes kind of the university changing what they're doing, perhaps making a fairer and level playing field for students. And as you said, I think a lot of us feel that students are sometimes recruited to fail by their admissions strategy. An interesting one about being less reliant as well. So perhaps a suggestion of kind of success being that we're not, or a suggestion that we are over reliant upon the university as it is potentially, and that might constrain how we go about what we do somehow. So a bit of a suggestion of that there as well. So lovely. Thank you very much. Room 3. Who do we have in room 3? Let's have a look. I've got a list actually. So
I'm not sure if that's our room or not.
Room 3 was Amy and Anne and Ursula and Shuvo.
Ursula, are you up, or are we sharing, or what do you fancy?
You've got all the notes.
Cool, right.
Sorry.
I'm off. Okay. So We started with our venues as well as some of the other groups have. So our venues, including our new venue in Luton, Sub 3, which was self-financed from our weekend private hire income. They're rocking every Wednesday and Friday night, packed to the rafters. We're bussing students in from other campuses because they just can't wait to be here. Metro looks like you've walked into the set of Central Perk from Friends. It's humming with mature students popping in between classes and places. Metro and Hub are filled during the week with student groups of all types fighting over the calendar to get their events held in time. And there are social groups set up on the satellite campuses that are bringing in the feedback and making demands of us for the events that they want when they want to come and join us on the main campuses. And that's all coordinated by a new staff member that's been paid for by their drinking habits. Our societies are thriving. They are loving the venues. And as you've already heard, they're fighting for the space. So all of the extra money from the commercial ventures is feeding into a great welcome package for new societies, providing each of them with startup funds. Societies have got easier access to their money. You've got almost instant access to funds and faster event organisation to feed student demand so that we can be more responsive. Students are merely sending voice commands through to our system because we've gone all high tech, and Ursula may be put out of work by that, we do appreciate. Every student who comes to UOB joins a society. With people almost fighting over the spaces in our biggest and best societies. Societies are thinking outside of the box and providing a wide range of activities, both obvious and not so. We were going to sign up to do skydiving with the Knitting Society, for example. Societies know to come to BEDSSU and not UOB for the good stuff. We've got rid of all of these little secret groups being sorted by staff members behind the scenes. And students are flocking to UOB purely for our societies. Finally, we said the BEDSSU was the go-to for all things student voice. The uni, local companies, market researchers, they don't even speak to students anymore because they know that we've already collated all of the most important thoughts, feelings and trends from our students already. So we are consulted with before any policy is written or redrafted in the university. We have got eyes on everything across the university because of our excellent rep system, and we're actually able to warn the university about emerging issues before they know about them, and they listen to it. UOB seeks to engage and please BEDSSU when making changes for students. They come and talk to us first. The Liberation Networks are self-sufficient, campaigning for change and even challenging us on our assumptions as well, holding us to account. Candidate numbers in our elections are through the roof, with 95% of students voting in our elections because they also can reserve the right to not vote in our elections. And 100% of students know that we are their union, not just a bar and the fun stuff.
Very good, very good. I like that a lot. Lots going on there. I like that you've afforded the extra 5% for those students who just might not want to. I've got a question about that in a little bit, which relates to some of the things that the other rooms have said. Thanks for feeding back, Amy, on behalf of Room 3 and Room 4. I think you're the final group. So that's Lisa and Alessandro. I think Sheila was in there, and there's someone else I've missed.
There was 4
Christina.
of us, so Christina, yeah. And so I'm going to take this one. Wow, it's not nice going last after all of those. Well, we just said we would not be needed anymore. We would all be made redundant because students would be 100% satisfied with their university experience. So that was nice and easy. But we then did have a look at some other ideas. One of the things was providing students with the best social experience at university. We went for 100% of students voting because I would hope even if they didn't want to vote, they would come and spoil their ballots. Active campaigning for minority groups. A sense of community amongst students. There's something for everyone and everyone wanted to be involved in the union. That's with 100% awareness amongst students of what the union is there for, and can come and dip in and out as they need to. Something for everyone doesn't mean they need us all the time, but at least they know we're there. We talked about staff and how we had 100% awareness amongst staff of what we do, with neutral respect for ideas and sharing. And then I have scribbled something else, which I don't understand. So we'll go with that.
Okay, thank you very much. So some more interesting stuff there. Thank you very, very much. Well done, Room 4. I mean, I'd love to see 100% of students voting. That would be great, even if they were spoiling their ballots. You mentioned kind of students socially engaging with us, and this being kind of got the sense of a more kind of busy community. You know, a real kind of sense of attachment as well.
Yeah, that's kind of the theme of we was going through, is this kind of idea of the community and students feeling part of what is the student union community and the social and experience of being part of that community.
No, I suppose a question related to that is, and this relates to all of the all of the feedback from the rooms really, which is, and it's kind of linked to that follow-up I had about engagement, what engagement means and how we really term that. And the reason I asked that question is because it's important for us to know and come out of the strategic development exercise knowing what success really looks like, and how, and basically then therefore questioning how do we define what success is. And that's a big part of what we're doing here. I suppose my question is that what students want? So do all students want to be part of that social community? Is everybody absolutely certain of that? For example, the comment room 2 made about recruitment and kind of recruiting in some of our views, we do feel that the university can be recruiting to fail. But actually, is that what students want? And I suppose the question is there a responsibility for us to be developing how we think we should be developing, or strictly in line with what students tell us? Has anyone got any views on that?
Could I jump in?
Please.
And just sort of say, I don't know, I would sort of say something that is student-led means that they would be more engaged, take more of responsibility, be actively engaged, because it's what they've brought up and it's what they care about, and it's the change that they want to see, it's the services they want to be provided, and I suppose taking ownership of their home, their community. Yeah, that's how I sort of see that.
And I think you've put that really well, Daphne, because that is the go-to for the Students' Union, and it's the go-to for most staff. And actually, I think we all know, and we've seen it if we've been part of it, is the idea of a busy community that we feel a part of, and students leading things for students is something really rewarding. But we're not the only university who's actually experienced some change. And actually, I'm going to talk later in the week, I'll be talking about the focus groups that I had with students. But there was a real sense from a good number of students that they didn't want to be leading things. They wanted things done for them, and they wanted to be dragged along, or they wanted to be left alone. Now, that wasn't all students, of course, but it just represented there was this real diversity of what students were expecting from their union and what success might look like to them. Amy, you've got a hand up, and then Lisa's got your hand up. So Amy first.
Yeah, I was gonna comment on Daphne's there as well, and think sort of, I think like in the sort of in year, that's totally the way that we'd like it to work, and I think it should work, and we kind of want a plan that maybe gives us enough flexibility to do that. But I was gonna comment that I think I certainly find it slightly different at Beds because of the different types of students that they bring in, and the fact that their plan to do that seems to change quite regularly. Now, obviously, we hope that with the new VC, sort of, a new plan comes in and it becomes maybe more consistent, and we know that they're already making noises about bringing in more sort of home younger students, which we're therefore not used to, and maybe our plan looks different. But actually, we don't know if that plan's going to work for them either. We don't know whether that's going to happen, and just sort of reflecting over the last 5 years, like we've seen such a shift in the students that we've had here. It kind of reached a point where we thought, well, that bit's kind of right, we'll throw that bit out of the strategic plan then, because that bit's now sort of null and void. So I just see that as it's almost impossible to answer your question, Mark, because we just don't know which way it's going to go.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if we think we don't know what's going to happen with Brexit, whether it will reduce the number of EU students, but actually in terms of income levels for the sector, it will remain the same because you'll have fewer students paying more. We just don't know, do we? Lisa, and then Mick.
Yeah, I just wonder if it's more about students know enough about us to make that decision to what level of involvement they want to have, because you're right, they won't all want to be leaders and be elected in our elections, but it's getting to that sense where they know enough about us to be able to step back or forward and being part of that community. My second point is that we've got to understand what we mean by this sense of community, because I think it's not always about being in our venue or seeing lots of busy people around the student union. We've seen some real success with our student chat room, which to students, that is a sense of community that they are building. It's a place that they're going to chat. So I think we need to understand what community means to our students and go for that.
And I think that'll be something to really remember as we go through this process, is that whilst we might see it as a challenge that students have such wide expectations of their SU, actually, whilst they might be wide, they might also be smaller or larger. So some students just expect a lot less, but they really value what they are getting. You know, it might not be the belt and braces part of all the societies and the events and things like that, but what they do get, they might really cherish. Sorry, Christina, I didn't see your hand, so I'm going to go to Christina before Mick. Christina.
I think like we spoke about it in our group, is like the idea of engagement, and actually I think at the moment we tend to think of engagement of like students coming to us, and I was talking about how have we engaged a student if we've managed to change something on their course. They haven't necessarily come to us and gone, can you change this for me, but we've improved it in that way, and that's still us engaging students and changing things. So I think, yeah, we've got a very sort of linear thing of like, we have to create the sense of community, and that has to be around sort of what we do in terms of societies, but actually we're changing their sort of academic community, even without them knowing it, and sort of how do you measure that and think about that.
I think you're right, but I think some of it might relate to what Lisa's saying. A phrase that was mentioned a few times in the focus groups was having my back. Students would say, I don't want anything to do with the SU, but I want to know they're there and they've got my back. And you know, that's a good example of that. Mick, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, I think you just sort of covered what I was about to say, because I think when we're looking at whether it's student-led or where we fit in as well, yes, student-led definitely, with events, with the way the community looks, the going forward, what we look like. But I think it's back to got your back. Is there also a role for us in almost like policing university standards to make sure they're delivering the right standard of teaching, that they're delivering the right standard of support, the admissions policy, so that we have this almost union got your back type role as well.
And it's simple, you know, it's an easy thing to say. Okay, lots to bear in mind. Thank you very much for that, Mick, and thanks for all your comments and all your visioning about 2026. I can't wait. To be honest, anything's better than 2020, so great, looking forward to it. I can't see everybody at the moment, so if you did have something you wanted to say before I moved on, can you jump in right now? Okay, I'm going to move ahead with the presentation if that's okay. So thanks for all of that. So what is the strategy development project? So really what we're here to talk about today, in essence, it's the formation of a long-term plan for organisational change. It's the formation of a long-term plan for how BEDS SU feels it needs to change to be 100% successful or as close to there as possible. And essentially, it's asking 4 questions. Where are we now? This is how you go about this formation. Where are we now? Where are we going to? What will get in our way? And what do we need to do to get where we want to be? You know, quite often when people are talking about strategy, they literally talk about getting from A to B. When strategies get complicated and they start to lose people and lose focus and get something that's called mission drift, where you've got a big mission, but actually you drift away from it. And it's really common in students' unions because we always want to achieve a lot. It's because we forget where we're trying to get to, and we're not synthesizing it very simply. But the way you can define, where you need to get to is by going through that process of like, okay, so be honest with ourselves, where are we now, and where is it we really want to get going to, and actually appreciating how things might change in the years ahead, and like it says, get in our way. So what does a strategic plan, what is a strategic plan, and what does it look like? Well, as I said, it is a long-term plan. Strategy should be what you're trying to achieve. Strategic plans also serve a secondary purpose. They're not just about achieving something. And sometimes this can be the most criticized aspect of a plan, which is that it can be this glossy thing that aims to try and inspire people and represent the sort of organization you are. Now, I can be cynical about that, and I'm sure others can as well, which is, what we don't want is this glossy thing that goes in, that we spend time doing, and it kind of sounds nice, and then we put it in a drawer, and it doesn't actually relate to the work we do. We don't actually advance it. That's a bad strategic plan. However, it can, as a document, as a vision, it can be something that does help communicate to our most interested stakeholders, so our students, our university colleagues, where we're going to and why. And they can see, and we can see as staff, as officers, how we are taking part in a bigger change that is, developing the union in its interests, in students' interests. So what does it look like? Well, a lot of you might have seen this before. It's a pyramid, and it's got these labels that goes from plans upwards towards a vision. The most common part of the strategic plan is the vision statement and the mission. Now, a lot of you will have come across this before, so please bear with me in explaining these. But part of it is not everybody will have come across these before. The strategic plan usually includes a vision statement. The vision statement is something achievable, but something very far off. You might have a strategic plan that lasts 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. Your vision statement might actually be 20 years. You're envisioning where you want to be as an organization, and in a way that's your A to B. It should be far off. Whilst it should be attainable and realistic, there should be an element of aspiration in there as well. Your mission statement is your raison d'etre. It's your purpose. It's why you exist, and it's kind of why you do what you do. It explains the way you go about your activities and for what purpose. Now, with students' unions, we have our charitable objectives, which is in our governing documents, our memorandum and articles of association. And actually our mission is communicated there, and lots of students' unions just put their charity objectives in as their mission. And along the process, we'll make that decision as to whether actually we see our mission as different. Now, when you were talking just moments ago about the union you saw in 2026, actually there were some real themes that came out there about what the mission of the union is. The mission might be to advance fairness and equality in provision for students. So what they're experiencing is comparable to other students in their course, in faculties, at different campuses, or of different backgrounds. So that the mission might change to help really define what our purpose is over the cycle of a strategic plan. The next tier down are the organizational values, and the values represent the character traits, the behaviors that we as a students' union, as a charity, as a business, as staff, on behalf of students, as executive officers within your representative duties, how would we be described by other people? Would they describe us as being fun, professional, friendly? What we want to make sure is that when we're defining values, we're not just saying platitude-like statements that sound good anyway. Everybody wants to be friendly, hopefully. and everybody would like to be ambitious in taking forward student goals. But the key thing is, what character traits do we need to achieve our end goals? You know, if our end goals are related to, let's say, restructuring the university so that they reallocate funds, that they start giving money back to students, and the union sets a strategy that's quite politically agitating, well, actually, our values probably won't be that we're friendly. Our values are probably going to be that we're bold, that we are tenacious, that we are unwavering in what we're trying to achieve for students. Now, of course, a lot of the things that you mentioned in your visions of 2026 might see us that our values are closer to fairness, advancing equality, being inclusive, and making sure we're student-led. Now, further down within the strategic plan, we will end up with strategic objectives. To achieve our vision, to enact our mission, and to live our values, we'll want to see that we have some defined objectives. And defined objectives are usually between, say, 3 and 6. You don't want too many, they get too confusing. You don't want too few, they're too limiting. Those objectives should be kind of umbrella objectives that incorporate a range of goals and activities. So those 4 things will be included within the strategic plan document. Now, below that, we then develop different strategies and plans. So I mentioned earlier how we'll be taking the strategic plan and we'll be applying it to department plans. We'll be working on them over summer, and basically that's the operational side of things. So how do we turn these visionary documents where we're setting out a big plan for the future into something that means something in our day-to-day? And that's what the lowest tier is. That's the operational plans. You'll have seen I've put sub-strategies here. The sub-strategies are things like a communication strategy. You know, there'll be certain areas of our work where we go, actually, we want a separate strategy for this. If we're to be successful, we think we need, you know, another vision that doesn't quite fit in the strategic plan. Of course, it will be connected. They should be aiming for the same thing, but we might split things up like that. So that's how it looks. And what I'm hoping to describe with the timeline a bit later on is how over the next 2 to 3 months, we'll be working on each level of this pyramid at some point together. And we'll be probably starting with the mission, then to vision, then working back down through values and objectives, but we'll work on them bit by bit together until we've got this formed plan. So I'm going to play a little video now, if you'll bear with me. So I think the video is kind of might be 5 minutes long. I've forgotten how long it is. It could be a little bit longer. So if you want to sit back, relax, enjoy. Let's just check the time. Yeah, we're doing okay. This video is kind of a book review. It's a summary of a management book that I really like. And I think it's a really good book about developing strategic plans. Obviously, there's lots of books about management and things like that. And I'm a bit of an avid reader of those, or at least was at one point in my life. This book by Richard Rummelt talks about good strategy and bad strategy. He summarizes what he's seen throughout a load of companies about their strategic plans and kind of picks apart the stuff that really annoys him, and then tries to lay out the stuff that actually he really likes taking from plans. What I really like about this is it's far more operational than you'd think. A lot of management books are very kind of high-minded in their approach, and they will talk about strategies as these huge titanic ideas that it's quite hard to see the tangibles. As you'll hear from this book review, this book's about saying, let's cut the faff. Let's make difficult choices. And I think this is a particularly good model to look at for students' unions, because we always want to do everything. We want to improve the generality of students' lives. Now, at present, that includes getting them money, getting them housing, changing their education, making sure they can get a good job, making sure they're treated friendly and nicely along the way, making sure they can get into university, get in fairly. You know, all of a sudden, I mean, I've got 6 things and I haven't even touched the surface. Actually, if we want to be a great students' union, we need to try and focus on exactly where to put our energies towards an outcome. Okay, sit back, get ready, here we go. And I'll need people to wave and shout if you can't hear anything.
Today, we share highlights in Richard Rumelt's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Have you ever wondered how to create a good strategy? Or perhaps you have the feeling that your company doesn't have a good strategy or a strategy at all? We can relate. Today, we will highlight 3 key areas that make up a bad strategy. We will also share 3 key items that make up a good strategy. And finally, how to start your own good strategy. So first, on to 3 items of a bad strategy. Number 1, failure to face challenge. You must define the challenge. So often, people fail to understand what their challenges are. If you cannot define the challenge, you cannot evaluate the means to improve or overcome the challenge. Next, the second area of a bad strategy is mistaking goals for strategy. Having goals does not equate to having a strategy. People often say they'd like to earn 20% more, or make $1 million, or take over an industry. These are all goals. Goals are the what that one would like to achieve, but goals do not identify the challenges that one needs to overcome to get there. You really need to understand the challenges to get to the why and the how of a strategy. Goals also do not outline your strengths. They do not identify your superpower, your unfair advantage that you can leverage. These are aspects that one must diagnose and understand as part of a strategic kernel. And third area of a bad strategy, bad strategic objectives. A strategic objective is set by a leader as a means to achieve goals. Strategic objectives are bad when they fail to address critical issues or when they are impractical. Failure to have a guiding policy will lead to disorganization, confusion, and incoherent actions. If the objectives do not align with a guiding policy, you and your organization are very likely to take actions that are incoherent and don't address the critical issues and challenges. Bad strategic objectives will not only be a waste of energy and be counterproductive, but are also likely to be frustrating and at best suboptimal towards achieving your goals. Now, let's dive into the 3 key components of a good strategy. First, you must diagnose. In diagnosis, understand challenges clearly and have them defined. Take inventory of strengths and weaknesses. Understand market conditions and potential existing or future advantages. If you can identify your challenges, you can consider options to overcome that challenge. Additionally, if you know your strengths, you can apply them effectively to the challenge. Get real clear about your challenges so that everyone on your team can contribute to successful diagnosis and remain key focus on the items of a good strategy. Secondly, you must arrive at a guiding policy. This is an overall approach for overcoming obstacles and realizing opportunities and advantages highlighted by that diagnosis. A guiding policy should help yourself or your team or your company channel their energy in a certain direction and not in other directions. A guiding policy does not intend to spell out exactly what shall be done, but rather guides the direction. Thirdly, you must have a set of coherent actions. You can think of coherent actions as a well-trained team knowing each other's roles towards a common goal. While coherent actions do not mean to be at a micro level, they should be clear and specific. and certainly actionable. A coherent action should coordinate in such a way that each other's actions build upon one another. They should fit and be consistent as to generate momentum in the right direction. So these key 3 items, diagnosis, guiding policy, and set of coherent actions, are the kernel of good strategy. Next, if you want to kickstart and learn how to craft a good strategy.
Okay, thanks everybody. That was okay.
Want to know what makes
no, no, go away. Great. So there was meant to be another slide there. So as we've just had that video, it talked about strategic plans. Now, one of the key things that I took from this book, and there's some references to terminology that we won't be carrying through, so we won't be talking about guiding policy and things like that. But the principle that is being explained is that you might need to take, you might not be able to take all paths. You might need to have some sacrifices. And as we go through the strategic planning process, I expect to be asking everybody involved, oh, well, we want to do these things. Which 3 of them are we going to do and why? We're going to try and, challenge our choices so that we can really direct our energies into the right places. Because the book is very, one of the things I took from the book has been so good and so very good about kind of projecting how you go about developing a strategic plan. Is it's about leveraging your strengths against your greatest opportunities for your business, for your charity, for your students' union. Looking at the challenges that you have and making difficult choices about the right action, rather than setting a strategy that actually just sounds good. And things we need to be really careful of is if our goals are to have, that 100% engagement, what we don't want to do is set strategic objectives that are just describing what that looks like. We actually need to set objectives that help us get to that 100% engagement and resolve a problem that's been getting in the way. So next, I'd just like to ask, I don't want to spend too long on this, I just want to ask the room what your experience of strategic plans has been, if anybody's got some experience they're willing to offer. And I'm looking for good and bad examples here. Do you find strategic plans something kind of fun to do at the time and then less relevant as time goes on? Have you felt a part of them? Is it something you feel happens to you or something you've taken part in? Has anybody got any views on that or any experience they can recall? Which could be current experience, don't worry about that.
I can go on past experience.
Ursula, go for it.
Well, just sort of more observations. Places I've worked at before, it was only ever sort of like the senior leadership team that were only ever involved in strategic planning. There was never much engagement. So these sort of bad examples. So there wasn't the engagement from employees to be able to input information that perhaps the senior leadership team didn't know about. So it was completely overlooked, and also unrealistic sort of end goals or objectives or aims, unrealistic things that were not achievable. So and the worst thing was a lack of planning. So it was a sort of age-old kind of fail to plan to fail. So unfortunately, the bad examples probably stick in my head more because you do remember the bad stuff more. But yeah, they were the things that sprang to mind. That's it.
Yeah. No, I saw Stacey giving a bit of a clap there because I think she's experienced that too. And I've certainly come across that before, where it can be quite, it happens in a silo at the top of the organisation, and it means that it doesn't get the benefit of wider experience or other issues that are happening that need to be advanced. Has anybody else got any reflections at all?
I was actually trying to raise my hand.
Oh, I'm
but,
so sorry, Stacey. Come in.
That's all right. No, I probably did the wrong one, so I'm trying to switch my video off as well. But I do agree with Ursula as well. Yeah, I think kind of my experience has been that I think it's really important that we have a strategic plan, because it provides us with focus. We know what we're working towards. It allows us to progress, grow, and be a little bit creative in how we go about doing that. It is something that certainly myself, Amy, and Christina often reflect on. I think the frustration is not having the time to spend on the creative stuff, the development stuff, because of the student stuff. And for me personally, sometimes that's really hard to prioritize. So yeah, that's just my feedback.
I think that's really good feedback, and it's going to be really important we keep coming back to that through the process, because strategic plans, if you need to make big, bold changes that completely rewrite everything around you, that's because you really, really need to, and you need to put all your energy into it, and it gets prioritized. But actually, that's quite an extreme example. Actually, most strategic plans should, be part of how you operate and how you work. If they're an add-on, that's on top of the work you do, that you're just trying to find to fit in, a bit like that, online course you're trying to fit in as well, and that playlist on LinkedIn and things like that. If that's the way you're looking at it, clearly it's not that important. It's not that urgent, and I think that's why that's a good example of a plan not quite hitting the button, where it's become less relevant to you. It's not so urgent anymore. And again, coming back to why I like this particular author in the video I showed, is that he keeps stresses, what's your urgent action that you absolutely desperately need to do that's going to have the best impact for your business or organization. Because we can go down the trap of saying all the lovely things we want to do that sound good and feel nice, but actually they're not so urgent that we prioritize them over other things we're doing. Oh, I'm just going to finish that paper instead, because actually that feels important. Really good example, Stacey. Thank you. Have we got any more before we move on? No. Okay. Thanks. Thank you for that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how strategies are developed. Following on from what we've just said, and actually segueing quite nicely from what Ursula and Stacey have mentioned about a couple of bad examples, really. Strategies should be developed by analysing what the organisation is doing, looking at the now, and also trying to rationally and reasonably assess what's ahead, and put them alongside your aspirations about how you want to see the future change. We might look at, say, some of those visions of 2026 that you spelled out at the start of the session. But we need to work out, like, there's one thing saying that's where we want to be. What are the things stopping us getting there? Which is why you do these internal assessments. So you look at your internal operations, your strengths and weaknesses. One of Rummelt's big things is applying your strengths to have the biggest impact. He doesn't necessarily say that if you want to develop a plan, you should fix all your weaknesses, because actually, whether it's sports people, business people, when people are trying to improve, if there's a weakness that's really holding them back, then they might work on it. But usually it's the strength that you make more of that takes you forward. So there's getting the right balance between where you put your energy. But of course, they need to be assessed. External threats and opportunities and market forces. You look at what's happening in the world around you. We've mentioned a few things, increased digitization, I thought Lisa was going to mention earlier about how everything was being automated, but of course, Mick's group talked about drones and things like that. Actually, we've got to look at what's coming up in the world and how things might change, and feed that into what we think is the most needed action. And just to reiterate, again, it's about leveraging your strengths towards your opportunities to make the most needed changes. But within that sentence, you need to understand what each of those are. So what are your strengths? How have we assessed what opportunities are? On what basis have we described, identified the most needed changes? Is it by asking ourselves at the beginning, as we did? Is it by doing student consultation? Well, actually, it's probably about doing lots of things. I'm just going to play an example of a shelter. So this is another video, and I feel that this video, it kind of gives you a summary of their strategic plan. I think it's a really good example of how they've focused on specific outcomes. I get the sense that they've made sacrifices to some things they might want to achieve. They're a charity with a really big remit, but actually they've focused on a set few goals that they think are the most important things that they need to focus on for their beneficiaries. So I think this is a really good example.
We're not just facing a housing crisis, we're facing a national emergency. It's not just affecting the thousands of people sleeping rough, it's the families in temporary accommodation and run-down B&Bs. It's the 1 in 4 households living in places that are unfit or unaffordable. We don't just need bricks and mortar, we need a home. It's fundamental as healthcare and education. But for 6 million households, the basic right to a safe home is denied or under threat. This is why Shelter exists, to defend that right. And we have a 10-year plan with 3 ambitions to achieve this. 1, we're going to stand up for the rights of renters and end the discrimination, exploitation and insecurity that stands between them and a safe home. 2, we're going to demand social homes for all those in greatest need, because a lack of social housing is at the heart of this emergency. Only 5,000 were built last year. This is nowhere near enough. 3, we'll provide holistic support to those at the sharp end of this emergency, helping with everything from managing debt to contesting evictions. In 10 years' time, we want everyone to understand their rights and have access to a safe home. To get there, we're going to take charge, to speak up for the voiceless, but we can't do it alone. We need you to rise up, to help us build a society that supports us all. It's going to be difficult, but join us, and together, we'll make it happen.
So sorry.
We're not just facing a housing crisis.
Sorry, I'm trying to get out.
We're facing a national emergency.
So hang on a minute, guys, I'm stuck. Stop share. Okay. Lovely. Wait. Okay. So one of the reasons that I'm showing you that, because I mean, obviously it's got that, terrifying music in the background, and it's it's urgent. It's really present. It's very clear. It says what they're there to do, and it lays it out very simply. Yeah, actually, what's underneath those objectives are lots of actions, lots of really important things. I think it's a really good example of a strategy that is clearly very focused about what they see as the major problems facing their beneficiaries. They have a really good narrative, like a very easy, sellable narrative. They buy you into it from the beginning. This is our challenge. This is what the world looks like we're not happy with, and we need to get here. And you get this real sense of what the A to B looks like. And then when they tell you your objectives, they align, they make sense. But in a way, they could have had so many more objectives in there. And that's what, again, I like about it, is they've focused their activity on what they think is the most needed action. So, I'm just checking the chat. Okay, lovely. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk you through, hopefully, how we're going to get to where Shelter got to. How are we going to get to that needed action? And how are we going to develop this strategic plan together? and who's involved and how and things like that. So I've talked about the analysis. We talked about the assessing what the barriers in the way are. And in the video, that Rummelt video book review thing, it talked about, you use this guiding policy to get your kernel of strategy. Well, actually, I've split it into 3 stages. We have our information gathering stage, and that's the where are we? What does it look like? And we've already got, an immense amount of information for that. But the big thing is that we pull out the narrative. So just like that shelter video, the first kind of 30 seconds where the voiceover says, we're at a crisis point, we're at this, we're at that. We need to paint the picture of where we think we are. And so that's what the information gathering stage is. The analysis and direction setting is starting to move beyond that. It's looking at how that's going to develop, potentially, what the barriers ahead are, and how the world is going to change. So that's what we'll be looking at there. And we'll also begin to start making choices about what we think is the most important or least important of things to focus on. And the final stage is prioritizing and formation. So we develop how to get there and what the most important things are for us to put our energies to. In essence, we start to form the plan. It starts to become a real thing. We're going to be using some tools, some kind of assessment methods to be able to do the plan. Here's a selection of some of them. So we'll be doing a SWOT analysis. So that's looking at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We will be doing what's called a PEST analysis, sometimes called a PESTLE analysis. A PEST analysis is horizon scanning. It's looking into the future and trying to conceive of how the world might change. So actually SLT and exec got together last week and had a go at doing a PEST analysis. We spent a couple of hours looking at what looking at 2030. We used 2030 as the year that we were imagining ourselves in. And we started to think, how would the world change for students in terms of politics, in terms of their economic situation? What will the socio-cultural world look like? Will students be in virtual reality all the time, or will they be meeting up still to join societies as they always have done? And we'll look at technological changes. So that's what we looked at too. And so that's all going to be written up, and that will be shared with the team as well. And the idea is that we do share all of this stuff, and all staff will have access to the information that's been put together in the plan. Of course, we'll have student and staff feedback, and a big part of this session is kicking that off. We'll be doing that in a mixture of workshops and smaller groups, as well as the odd survey I'm going to send round. And the reason for doing this is this is going to be a 2-month, 3-month project. It's impractical for everybody to be involved at every level of the stage all the time, because we need to move the project forward. But also we want to get the right views from and the right information from people and the right input in the right way. And we don't want it to be burdensome either. We have some staff full-time, some staff are part-time, and we can't reasonably ask that people are spending 8 hours a week feeding into this process. We've already done some stakeholder analysis. So at our last conference, we had a go at doing this, and that still exists, and that's going to be again shared back out. And we're also going to be looking at the sort of organisation we want to be, and that will help us start to define our cultural values. And I've got something called an iceberg assessment I'll be sending round that I'll hope to engage everybody in as well. Who'll be involved? So I've got some kind of stakeholder groups on the left here. First of all staff, so we'll have all staff meetings, and I'll show you a timeline in a minute where that comes into effect. There'll be some parts that are just SLT and exec. There'll be some parts that are just SLT. There'll be some parts that are just the exec and the CEO. There'll be a development group. There'll be some parts of the process where we ask departments to work on something together, and you'll see that SLT have started putting in dates for a kind of department away day or something similar to that, so a longer meeting in a few weeks' time. So there'll be a real kind of diversity of who's involved when, And the reason it's designed like that is, again, to try and keep the process going, make sure everybody feels involved and can be involved, but it isn't overburdensome, and there aren't too many people for certain stages of the development. I do identify a development group. Now, it's good sense and practice in strategy formation exercises that actually there is a smaller group that looks at the data in more detail. Because of the focus on analysis and wanting to know where you are when you're setting plans, it's not really conceivable to involve 20 people in doing that and actually move forward very productively. So we'll have a smaller group which will be responsible for working through the detail of all of our consultation and our feedback. And they'll also help with that pulling together and making difficult choices over priorities that we start identifying later in the process. So at the moment, we've got that set out as SLT, a couple of exec committee members, and then a few of our managers as well. So let's see the timeline. The first stage kicking off in January, so launching of the development of the strategy at the staff conference. That's where we are here. You'll see at the top that there are focus groups kind of December to January, so those focus groups have taken place, and I'm planning to make reference to those on Friday in the What Do Students Think About Beds SU session. We had a horizon scanning session last week with SLT and exec. And as we get into February, we'll be having those away days or the meetings or longer meetings with departments themselves. And that will be the information gathering stage. The analysis and direction setting stage, so that will take place through February and March. We'll start to bring data and everything we've got so far together for the development group to start working through. The idea with that is the development group starts workshopping some of all of the documents we have into things we can then share with staff. And so as we get into March, we can then start presenting that in a more cohesive manner to kind of staff conferences, staff activities, just like this. And that's where we'll start spending time together, setting the vision and values of what we see the strategy as being. And we'll also begin a long listing activity. So that's probably going to happen outside of a workshop. It'll be maybe a survey or something like that. That looks to get everyone's views on how we prioritize what we want to achieve. And those things will come from the vision and values session. We'll then look to do some review after that, start sharing what's been developed with trustees, talking it through more with exec, before we move into the final stage, which happens really from April through to August. And that's the point at where we start to look at where some of the problems might arise when we take our strategy forward. So it's working backwards from that vision and values. We're looking at whether we've got the money to take it forward and make the changes we want to see. We'll start defining what success looks like. And we'll be retaking back the draft, because we'll form a draft plan at that point. We'll be bringing it back down to local levels to be actioned by departments as well. And of course, as we get into May through, we'll look at getting it signed off by trustees, with then May to August, those kind of lower order plans, our department plans, our kind of aligning strategies will all start to come together as well. So conscious of time, we've reached our 5 o'clock. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to open the floor to questions before closing up the session. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it's been relatively informative and that you're a bit more aware of how the plan's going to be developed. Have we got any questions?
I think Mick's got one in the chat.
Oh, great. So was it considered whether to have a member of staff on the development group? So the development group is mostly staff. So we've got 2 officers, and then we've got managers and SLT. Are you meaning non-managerial staff on there, Mick?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Great, because we're all staff. Yes, we can have a look at that. we really need to be careful about capacity and what we're expecting of that group. So it might be that we look at when those meetings are going to happen, what the resources are they're going to look at, because actually there's also a question over the managers on that group, whether we all have the capacity to engage. But yeah, definitely relook at that. And I think in terms of who is actually on that group, it's probably going to be reviewed, because it will depend on whether we all have the capacity to commit to it in the way that I think that group needs. That said, a lot of the work, I'm going to be pushing forward the work. That's, my role. It's my job here. The key thing is that I want to make sure I'm getting the benefit of the wider team in developing this. Thanks, Mick. Any more questions? I've been talking at you a while, so probably zoomed out. If you do have any, please do email me or Slack me, and we can have a quick meeting as well. Really appreciate any feedback or ideas that you have going forward. And thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and hope it's been informative. Okay, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and goodbye.
Bye.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Mark. Bye.
Bye.